Mystery Mansion. Chapter 1. The Horror Begins. It was a cold winter's night in the village of Netherboggy. Loud moans ran out from Mystery Mansion, deep in the marshes, and a glowing yellow mist curled around its walls. Down in the gloomy churchyard, Jimmy Flint was digging graves. He shivered when he heard the moans, but he kept on digging. Will those moans ever stop? For a moment, Jimmy wished he was home in bed. Then he remembered his nightmares. Almost every night, Jimmy dreamed a savage wolf was chasing him. He stopped digging and nervously looked up. He had the feeling something was watching him now. Jimmy wiped his sweaty face with a rag. Then, gripping his shovel tightly, he began to dig even faster. A few minutes later, Jimmy heard a noise. He turned around slowly to see a dark shape springing out of the bushes at him. Jimmy let out a piercing yell. His worst nightmare had just come true. Chapter 2. Harry's Adventure. Sounds like the master's in a rage again. Life was hard for the servants at Mystery Mansion. The ancient house was cold and crumbling, and everyone was scared of the master, Lord Rakenhill. Ever since his son Edmund had left 10 years earlier, his bad temper had grown worse. They were even more scared of the butler, Mr. Porphyry, the most important servant in the house. The least important servant, according to Mr. Porphyry, was Harry Grubb. Harry's main job was cleaning all the boots and shoes, but however hard he tried, he could never please the butler. Scrub faster, Grubb! In all of Mystery Mansion, Harry liked only 2 people. One was Anna, the dusting maid, and the other was Miss Charlotte, Lord Rakenhill's only daughter. Harry was great friends with Anna, but he had never dared speak to Miss Charlotte. One bitterly cold December day, the cook sent Harry with a message for the gamekeeper. On the way, he passed the blazing fire. He was just warming his hands over the flames when a voice barked at him. "What do you think you are doing, Grubb?" It was Collie, the head gardener. Harry explained where he was going, but Collie had another plan for him. "Put his in the hollow tree trunk by the river," he said, handing Harry a small envelope. "Don't tell anyone. Now!" Harry raced off, but he hadn't gone far when he heard a cry from the river. It was Miss Charlotte. She had fallen through the ice and was up to her shoulders in freezing water. "Help!" Harry rushed to a fallen tree, broke off a branch, and raced back. "I'm coming!" Standing firm on the bank, he swung one end of the branch over the river. "Grab to this, Miss Charlotte," he shouted, "and I'll pull you out." In just a few minutes, Charlotte was on the river bank, shivering and gasping. "You saved my life, Harry. Thank you." Charlotte was safe, but Harry was worried that she would die of cold. "Follow me, miss," he said. "I know where to find some dry clothes for you." "Promise you won't tell anyone. My father would be furious." Before long, they'd reached Collie's shed, where Harry snatched up a bundle of clothes. Soon, Miss Charlotte was warm and dry. though she felt rather silly. I look like a scarecrow. Harry had other things to worry about. He lost Collie's envelope, and he still hadn't delivered the message for Cook. He was going to be in big trouble. Chapter 3. Harry in Trouble. Harry ran to the gamekeeper with Cook's message, but he couldn't find the envelope anywhere. Then, running back into the house, he bumped into Mr. Palfrey, who quickly hid something behind his back. "Where have you been, Grub?" the butler snarled. Harry had promised never to tell what happened at the river, so he kept quiet. "Answer me, boy!" Mr. Palfrey shouted, but Harry simply looked down in silence. "Cat got your turn?" Palfrey thought for a moment. Then his mouth twisted into a cruel smile. "Since you don't want to talk to anyone, you can collect up all the boots and shoes and walk outside." Harry walked for hours in the icy courtyard. He sat shaking, his fingers stiff with cold. He was beginning to despair when he heard someone call him. Harry looked around and spotted Miss Charlotte. "Whatever are you doing out there in the cold?" she called. "Come in at once." "Did you hear me, Harry?" A few minutes later, Harry was thawing out and drinking hot soup beside the kitchen fire. "Thank you, Miss Charlotte." But he couldn't relax for long. A door burst open and Collie strode into the kitchen. "Well, did you deliver my envelope?" he asked. "No," Harry admitted. "Harry," said Collie, turning to go. "I'll just have to find the spare key," he muttered. Mystery Mansion, Chapter 4. Terror in the Tower. The next day, there were 4 funerals in Netherbury. 3 men had drowned in the nearby marshes. The 4th man, Jimmy Flint, had died of fright. "Why do so many people die around here?" After the funeral, Magnus Duncan, the clock winder, slowly climbed the church tower to wind the clock. He was exhausted. For the last few nights, noises from Mystery Mansion had kept him awake. If he did fall asleep, it was to terrifying nightmares filled with bats. Now, as he climbed, Magnus heard strange scuffles overhead. "Hello?" The next moment he was surrounded by leathery wings. Hundreds of bats were flapping over his head. With a terrified scream, Magnus fell back down the stairs, just as he always did in his nightmares. Chapter 5. Midnight Secrets. A few nights later, Harry woke to find Anna standing by his bed. "There are strange noises coming from downstairs," she hissed. "Come on, let's see what's happening." Harry was terrified. The servants weren't allowed to leave their rooms at night, and Mr. Palfrey had told them to ignore any noises they heard. But he couldn't let Anna go down alone. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" "I think the noises were coming from the kitchen." Anna whispered, leading the way. To Harry's relief, the kitchen was empty. He was about to suggest going back to bed when Anna spotted a light outside. Peering into the darkness, they saw three shadowy figures. "They're heading for the ruined chapel. Come on." "What if we get caught?" Harry followed Anna into the garden and crouched down behind a pillar in the ruined chapel. From their hiding place, they had a perfect view of the three figures. "Dig faster, Porphyry." One was Mr. Porphyry, one was Dr. Grim, the village doctor, and the third was Lord Ravenhill himself. He was barking out orders while Porphyry dug up lumps of soil and plants. "What are they doing?" Harry asked Anna. She shrugged. Suddenly, they heard a menacing growl. Lazarus, Lord Ravenhill's massive hound, had sniffed them out and was about to spring. There was no time to worry about being seen. Leaping to their feet, Harry and Anna fled. Harry clambered over a wall and kept on running. Down to the misty marshes, he lost sight of Anna, but the dog was close behind. The next minute, Harry began to sink into the marsh. As he cried out for help, Lazarus ran up and clamped his arm between vicious fangs. Just when Harry thought things couldn't get worse, a horrifying figure appeared. "Let's go," the stranger shouted to Lazarus. The dog obeyed instantly. As he trotted away, the stranger pulled a terrified Harry out of the marsh. "Now follow me," the stranger ordered. "This marsh is dangerous. You must step exactly where I step. Do you understand?" Harry nodded and they set off through the mist. But they hadn't gone far before Harry heard a dreadful wailing. He gasped. The boggy ground seemed to be filled with skeletons, which were reaching out to grab him. "Help me!" Chapter 6. Waking Up. The next thing Harry knew, he was waking up in a strange bed, in a bright, warm room. Looking around in surprise, he saw Anna grinning at him. "Where are we?" he asked. "How did we get here?" "It was amazing," Anna began. "I was completely lost when I saw the ghost of my dead mother." "What?" cried Harry. "I know it sounds crazy," Anna went on, "but she led me through the marshes, and then Edmund brought me here." "Who's Edmund?" asked Harry. "She means me." "Hello again, Harry," said a tall man with a grin. "We've already met on the marshes, but I was covered in bandages. Ready to come down for breakfast?" "Yes, thank you, sir," Harry said, leaping up. He loved Edmund at once. But who was he? Why did he wear bandages on his head? And how had he managed to control Lazarus? Downstairs, Edmund put more logs on the fire. "You don't have to call me Sir Harry," he said gently. "Now I'm sure you've hundreds of questions, but let's eat first." Edmund cooked Harry and Anna the best breakfast they had ever eaten, with plump sausages, runny eggs, crisp bacon, and stacks of toast. "Edmund," Harry asked when he was too full for another bite. Why were you wearing all those bandages last night? Two reasons, Edmund replied. One, so I'm not recognized, and two, so I don't breathe in any terrible marsh gas. Edna looked worried. Why don't you want to be recognized? She asked. Have you done something wicked? Edmund spluttered into his tea. Oh no, he said. I just don't want someone to know I'm here. I had to leave Winterbury once before because of him. He added mysteriously. This time, I mean to stay. Chapter 7. A Strange Story. Harry and Anna were more confused than ever, but Edmund had no time for other questions. I'm afraid I have to go, he said, but I'll be back soon. You will be safe here. And he set off, with a scarf wound tightly around his head. Did you recognize him? Harry asked Anna when they were alone. I'm sure I've seen him before. Anna shook her head. He seems friendly, though, she said. Suddenly, there was a knock on the window and a loud scream. They're alive! Miss Charlotte? Harry dashed to the door to let her in. I thought you were dead, she cried. I can't believe you are here. Quickly, she told him what had happened at Mystery Mansion. In the middle of last night, she had been woken by Mr. Pomfrey shouting at the servants. Woke up, everyone! Listen, all of you. Is anyone missing? He had demanded. Harry Grubb is missing her. So is Anna Sargent. Then, one morning, Mr. Pomfrey announced that Harry and Anna had stolen a silver cup. He said they dropped the cup before drowning in the marshes. The thieves left this evidence. But we are not thieves. Don't worry, said Charlotte. My father will sort this out. Harry took a deep breath. It's not as simple as that, he said. I think your father and Pomfrey are up to something together. Mystery Mansion, Chapter 8. Waking Nightmares. Dora Much was the noisiest person in Netherbury. She was always asking awkward questions. Why did so many people drown in the marshes? And what had frightened Jimmy Flint? Dora thought back to other strange events. Old McGibbons had thrown herself under a cart, screaming that witch hunters were after her. Leave me alone. Thomas Bradpole had drowned himself in the river to escape from the shadows that haunted him every night. And Magnus Duggan had broken several ribs after his dreadful fall. Now he was being cared for at Mystery Mansion. The village doctor was checking up on him every day. Dr. Grim's here to see you again. But poor Magnus was still seeing bats. Calm down, you'll soon feel better. Now, Dora had started having nightmares too. Many years ago, her husband Norman had tripped over a cat and broken his neck. Every night, his ghost was haunting her with its neck all twisted. Dora was terrified that she'd be the next to die. That morning, Dora was walking into the village when she heard some footsteps close behind her. Peering through the mist, she saw a shadowy figure with a strangely twisted neck. Oh no, not Norman! A piercing scream ran through the air as Sora Much collapsed in a heap. Chapter 9. Temper Tantrum. Meanwhile, up at Mystery Mansion, Lord Ravenhill was in another furious rage. First my son leaves me, and now my daughter has disappeared, he stormed. Throwing himself onto a tiger skin rug, he began to beat the floor with his fists. I won't take this lying down. I'm in charge around here. In a few minutes he was completely tangled up in the rug. Get this thing off me, he howled. It's eating me alive. The housekeeper was trying to calm him down when Dr. Grim arrived and gave Lord Ravenhill a large injection. Then he turned to the housekeeper. We must get him away from here as soon as we can. He can't take much more of this. Jack-o'-lantern will destroy us all. Chapter 10. Shocks and Surprises. Back at Edmund's cottage, Anna was making tea when Edmund returned, with Sora in his arms. Bring some water quickly, he called to Anna. Anna ran to the water pump, but then she heard a crow laugh. If it isn't little Anna. It was Porphyry. Lazarus seems pleased to see you, he sneered. I think I'll let him off the leash. Anna screamed. The second before Lazarus launched himself on Anna, a clear voice rang out from the cottage. No, boy, cried Edmund, and the hound slumped to the ground. Porphyry was furious and very confused. That dog never obeys strangers. He looked more closely at Edmund. Hey, haven't I seen you somewhere before? He demanded. Edmund smiled. Indeed you have, he replied. Surely you haven't forgotten me? Porphyry's jaw dropped. You are Master Edmund. Yes, Porphyry, I'm Edmund Ravenhill. Harry and Charlotte, who had raced out behind Edmund, listened in amazement as he went on. Did you think, when you forced me to leave home 10 years ago, that I was gone for good? Edmund, Charlotte interrupted. Is it really you? Why didn't you come home to Mystery Mansion? I didn't trust Porphyry not to turn father against me, said Edmund. Coley knew I was back. He gave me a key to the cottage. Edmund glared at Porphyry. I'd come back to sort out Jack-o'-lantern. And you, he declared. What can you do? Sneered Porphyry. Jack is turning all the villagers crazy. And your father, with his rages, is craziest of all. And that suits you, Edmund retorted. He's too worried about Jack to notice your bullying or stealing. Porphyry's face grew bright red. He looked as if he were about to hit Edmund, but then he simply turned and ran off into the marsh. Porphyry's been stealing from father for years, Edmund told the others. When I found out, He bullied me until I left home. But who's Jack? Asked Harry. He sounds worse than Mr. Pomfrey. Oh, Jack-o'-lantern isn't a man, said Edmund. It's the name of the yellow gas in the marshes. When the marsh plants rot, they give off a dangerous gas that makes people see things. Like skeletons? Asked Harry, remembering his trip across the marsh. Or ghosts? Said Anna. It was all starting to make sense. So all the nightmares are Jack's fault, put in Charlotte. Exactly, Edmund said. Father has tried to stop it for years. I even remember him digging up plants at night to study them. Harry and Anna looked at each other. So that's what he was doing by the chapel, Anna thought. But why was Lord Brackenhill so secretive? Harry asked. He didn't want anyone to know how dangerous the gas was, Edmund explained. He was afraid everyone would leave and the village would die. But it must be the gas that's making Father Rage's worse, said Charlotte. We'll have to leave. Edmund shook his head and smiled at her. I've been studying the marsh plants for 10 years. Last month, I finally found a plant we can grow that will destroy Jack. When Edmund walked through the door of Mystery Mansion, Lord Brackenhill shouted for joy. But he was even more excited when he heard his son's news. It's a miracle, he cried. After all these years, soon the nightmares will be over forever. What happened afterwards? Edmund's plan to make the marsh gas harmless worked. Today, there are still mists around the house and village, but they don't glow in the dark or make people see things. Mystery Mansion was renamed Misty Mansion and became a different place. Lord Brackenhill decided to make a trip around the world. He left Edmund in charge, and the servants became the most well-treated in the country. Harry grew up and became a butler. Miss Charlotte married a man named Lord Snortle and had 7 children. And Edmund paid for Anna to go to the college, where she became an expert on plants. As for Mr. Pomfrey, he vanished into the marsh mist and was never seen again.